You're listening to the Mezzo Guild podcast.
بس أنا لازم أحسه الأول عشان أقوله.
아직 나의 어색한 한국말이 짤따рат하고 지적하지 말아주세요.
Я хочу с тобой серьезно поговорить.
Gaeilge níos fearga. No, an chuid is mó daoine sa hír seo.
Language learning made simple. Hey everyone. I hope you had a really great Christmas and New Year celebrating wherever you are in the world. I did. We had our son's first Christmas, which was really special. Although I suspect he was probably more interested in the wrapping paper than the new toys at his age. We also spent a whole nother fun month holidaying back home in Australia. I was introducing my son to my family. And so we had a really good but very busy end to 2017. But here we are in 2018 with lots of tentative travel plans to share with you soon. Normally, every year at around this time, I come up with a routine idea for New Year's language learning resolutions. I usually do some kind of how to plan or prepare or accomplish your language goals for the new year. But I think that New Year's resolutions rarely work out for most of us. We tend to forget about them by about February. So not going to do that this time. But today what I want to do is share with you one of my own personal goals that I've set this year, which I've been itching to get started on for a long time now. And that is to learn Greek. But to be more precise, to learn two Greeks. To learn Greek times two. And that is Modern Greek and Koine Greek at the same time. My goal for 2018 is to learn a spoken language, a spoken modern language, and its written ancestor simultaneously. Now, what is Koine Greek? Well, firstly, it's not a brand new language for me. I'm not starting from scratch. As I've shared often in the past on my blog, the first foreign language that I attempted as an adult in college was a language that's no longer spoken. Koine Greek. Koine meaning common. Greek was the global lingua franca, the global language, similar to the way that English is now, from the time of Alexander the Great to a few hundred years after Christ. It was spoken across most of the developed world at that time. Half of the Bible, the New Testament, was written in it. All of the original gospel accounts and letters were written in it. So historically speaking, it's probably the most consequential language in history, as it facilitated the early spread of Christianity across the Roman Empire, and it totally changed Europe. So I took this language in seminary before taking up linguistics. 4 years of it. I flunked the first year completely, and it wasn't until I started developing my own visual spatial learning strategy for myself that I went from being a total failure at it to a grade A student. And I explain on my blog how I did that. I originally wanted to master Koine Greek back in the day, and I even wanted to continue on and do a PhD, but I ended up taking a very different direction with Arabic. But now I'm just arriving back at the point of picking up where I left off. It's been a long time. I still don't quite know how rusty I am, but I'll soon find out. Although, as I often say, if you learn a language properly the first time, then you never truly forget it. Now, my reasons for wanting to learn Modern Greek, I'm not limiting myself to Koine Greek, as I said. I'm taking up Modern Greek at the same time, and I'm aiming for conversational fluency this year. Just to let you know, Koine Greek evolved into Byzantine or medieval Greek, and then ultimately it evolved into the Greek that we have today, the modern Greek that we have today. But unlike Old English and Modern English, I have been told that Koine Greek, even though it's 2,000 years old, is still fairly intelligible to modern day Greek people, meaning they can pick up a New Testament or something and they can get a fairly good idea of what it means, so they can read it. So I'm fairly certain there's a strong advantage for me here if this is the case. This will be the first time where I'm using an ancient language as a foundation to learn a modern conversational language. There may be drawbacks to this. No doubt the vocabulary and syntax have changed significantly over time. So I'm assuming it'll be tough dealing with interference between the two, where one language confuses the other. And this is, by the way, why I usually don't advocate learning two languages simultaneously, especially when they're very similar. So why Modern Greek then? Well, a few reasons. Firstly, to find out how useful a linguistic ancestor is to learning a modern-day spoken language. It's another experiment. I ran another experiment recently, so this is kind of my second experiment. I've been all over Europe, Turkey, and the Middle East, and I've never set foot in Greece. This is another reason. I lived in the Middle East, obviously. I've learned Arabic. I lived in Turkey and I studied Turkish there, but I've never ever been to Greece, and I've always wanted to go there. And the other reason is that some of my friends from Egypt actually work with refugees in Greece, so there may be an opportunity there for me to come alongside them. So Greek would obviously be very useful for that. It's also just time for me to take up a new challenge, as I had a long break last year, over 2017, and 2016 was also a really hectic year for me, getting married and moving to the United States. So I've just been itching to get back into language study. So Greek is my target for this year. I'm amazed at how much my own language learning strategies have improved over the last decade. I've developed strategies for learning that I never had a chance to implement when I originally learned Greek in college, and in retrospect, it would have saved me a lot of time and stress. For example, I came up with an approach called chunking, developed on the back of Michael Lewis's lexical approach, which has been enormously successful for me personally. It's helped me learn several languages, and it's also grown in a lot of popularity online over the last few years. Other language bloggers have actually adopted it from me. Admittedly, everything I've applied is for spoken languages, but I've never had a chance to reapply this learning approach to ancient written or written languages that I took in my earlier years of study. So I'll be sharing my results and methods as I go along. We'll see how it works out. As for resources, I'll be going back to my very first textbook for Koine Greek first. It's The Elements of New Testament Greek by Duff and Wenham. I use an older edition of it, but I may purchase the newer edition because it has an audio component now, and obviously a Greek New Testament. One thing I'll be doing differently though this time is that I'll be focusing on English to Greek translations, and in other words, producing the language. I didn't do much of this in college because it was widely regarded as unnecessary. You know, why translate into a language that nobody speaks anymore? But now I have the experience to know otherwise, to know that this is not the case. So I'll be doing that differently. For vocab training, there seem to be some great courses up on Memrise at the moment that I'll make use of, at least initially. And I'll also be creating my own audio tracks. And I'll explain more on my blog how I do this. As for Modern Greek, you'll be surprised to hear that I've actually decided to give Michelle Thomas a second chance. And yes, you heard that correctly. My Michelle Thomas review ended up being one of my most controversial posts and positions yet. People either strongly agreed or strongly disagreed with me. Some think that I was being very unfair because I reviewed the Arabic edition, and therefore I must have had a preconceived opinion. Hotter Education actually weren't happy about my review, and they contacted me, offering me another free sample. They offered me Michelle Thomas Total Greek, so that I could give them a second chance. And so I've decided to do that. I've decided to take them up on that offer. I'm going to be going through the Michelle Thomas Greek audio course exactly as they recommend that I do, and then we'll see at the end just how much Greek I've learned. As far as modern conversational Greek goes, I really know absolutely nothing. I don't even know how to say hello in Greek. So I feel like a complete beginner, even though I may have some familiarity with Greek and be able to recognize words from Koine. Later on, I'll take an italki lesson, just to test my results. For a change, I want to keep this as simple as possible in the beginning, so I'm not going to overwhelm myself with Greek resources until I complete the Michelle Thomas audio course, and then I'll assess its true value. So that's it for my 2018 goals. Just a final note that I'll be, I plan to experiment with a few different content styles and platforms for this year. I've always preferred writing on my blog. I'm a writer at heart, and I prefer that to other mediums like YouTube and so on, but trends are really changing. Things seem to be really changing quickly. Although I've experimented a little bit here and there with this podcast and with video on YouTube, being the absolute contrarian that I am, I've always decided to stick with what I like and what I'm good at, despite what everyone else is doing. I don't like to follow the crowd and do what everyone else is doing, but this year I'm committed to being a little more adventurous. So I've decided to spend more time on other platforms getting my message out in different ways, in addition to my writing. So I'll be sharing more about this soon, and I'll update my progress with Greek on other platforms like Instagram and YouTube and this podcast. So chat soon, guys. Thanks.